you've mentioned that after you came back from war, that you also experienced some sort of difficulties expressing what you've been feeling. And
Mm.
then, fast forward, you are writing a book, about that. So,
Yeah.
so, and from everything that you're, mentioning, I guess this is sort of a two-part question, but from everything that you're mentioning, it seems that you have this level of self-consciousness and self-assessment that lets you to sort of get into what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, and you're trying to resolve that. Wow, it seems that a big problem of this sort of post-war problems is coming from the fact that many people are not, capable of facing that and sort of, going through this thought process. So, I'm I'm firstly interested to hear what was it for you to going from not really comfortable to talk about that to expressing all of this on paper for people to read it, you know,
Yeah.
and why, and well, I guess it's a specific characteristic, but why do you think you managed to develop yourself to a level that it led you to self-assess yourself and to battle your problems, and this is not happening to many people, right?
Mhm.
Where's the difference?
Initially, a lot of it was like two guys really helped me, kind of come home from the
Mm,
war. And I would talk to them about it, and they were civilians. Like
mm,
the misconception is that veterans don't want to talk about their experience. They're
mhm,
not going to talk about it. Um, and the reality is we want to, but it's difficult to talk about morally ambiguous or just kind of dark stuff like that
mhm,
gallows humor.
mhm.
And so I remember when I first got home from Afghanistan and I told a story and everyone was just horrified. And I was like, okay, I'm never talking about this ever again, because they
Wow.
think I'm a monster. And
Mhm,
eventually I was just like, leave it be. We're not going to talk about this stuff. I don't care. And, I went on living with my life. And when I got home from Ramadi, and
mhm,
I was getting out of active duty and switching over to the reserves, um, I was like, I'm gonna get a job. I'm gonna kill the job, and I'm gonna
mhm,
get on with my life. And because it was like 28, 29, and I was like, man, I haven't even started a career.
mhm,
What am I doing with my life? And so I was like, all right, I need to focus in on other stuff.
mhm,
And so I got busy just working. And
mhm.
I mean, I didn't talk to anybody about anything that I had
Wow.
ever been through. And I got married in 2011, and like even my wife was like, she just didn't know anything. Like she knew that I had like awards and stuff, but like
Mhm,
she'd never seen like my military stuff. And when we met, I was just getting out of the military, and so it was a really kind of strange conundrum for her to like know aspects about me but not understand me,
mhm.
and was like, why is he the way that he is, why is this stuff? And like that shadow box behind me right there
Yeah.
is like it's like a lot of my awards and everything that for up until 2 years ago, that was all like in a box underneath a bed,
Wow.
just because I was like, uh
Yeah.
this is stupid. Like I don't want to,
Yeah.
And now I'm a little bit more proud of everything. I was like, I realized like this is where God has specifically put me in life, is to like help other people
Mm,
to be the veteran advocate. And so I want to do that. And our community can be really petty,
mhm.
but so like I said, in 2016, I wrote this article about moral injury, and
Mhm.
it went stupid viral, like 1 million views. I was like,
Wow.
good night. And I realized I had hit something on the head, and I was like, okay, well, that's cool. I'm not going to say anything. Because, and again, it was during that coursework when I was learning about moral injury, and so I wrote about it, and I was like, wow, I guess I touched a cultural nerve.
Mhm.
And I went to my editor at Medium. Her name is Steph. And I said, hey, what do you guys want me to write about? I'm having a little bit of writer's block. And she's like, oh, man, we love that war stuff. That was awesome. And like Medium is very left leaning
Mm-hmm.
as far as like from a liberal
Mm-hmm.
standpoint. I was like, you guys want to hear about war? That's weird. And I was like, that was a one off. I don't talk about that. I was like, that's not
Mm-hmm.
something I do. And they were like, and she said, she goes, well, that's a travesty. And I was like, what? Why? And she said, look, you guys are the smallest minority in the United States. You realize that, right? She's like, less than, 1% of you have served in
Mm-hmm.
these wars.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, we're losing all of these stories to the annals of history because you guys come home, you don't talk about it. We've already
Mm-hmm.
lost enough from like the Korean War, Vietnam, especially World War II. And she goes, we need to know about the humanity, the complexity, and the barbarity of combat so that we don't repeat this stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
also that we learn from it. And I was like, and she was like, and by you not being willing to do that, she's like, it's not brave. She was very gentle about it, but she
Mm-hmm.
basically called me a
Yeah.
coward. And I was like, oh man, um, that's real.
Yeah.
And so slowly but surely, I started writing about some of my experiences, and it was really therapeutic. And ultimately, I just kind of discovered that like people were interested about what had happened
Mm-hmm.
and what had gone on during that time period. And it was hard, but what really pushed me to do it was um, when I first started writing that article.
Mm-hmm.
I had just found out. So I met this priest while I was in Ramadi. His name was Father Rochford, and he was a Vietnam veteran. And he was one of six people out of like 150 in his platoon to survive the Tet Offensive. And I was like, how'd you become a priest? And he was like, the Tet Offensive. He was like, I asked God to spare me. He did. So I became a priest. I was like, oh, that's
Wow.
crazy, dude.
Yes.
And he was like one of the coolest dudes. And I didn't really believe in anything at that time
Mm-hmm.
period. I was like, maybe there's a God, maybe there's not. I don't care. But
Mm-hmm.
he just really planted some seeds in me that eventually led to like kind of a faith conversion thing in my life that I'm very adamant about now and working that spiritual side of
Mm-hmm.
aspects and for veterans and
Mm-hmm.
having them explore faith and in general. But he gave me like his Bible and then a card in it and told me to stay in touch. And I would talk about him with my wife, especially when I converted to Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, you always talk about this priest. Like, how come you haven't reached out to him? This is like 2016. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I should reach out to him. So um, I have this footlocker I keep in the garage full of like memorabilia and stuff that I'd never touch. And I go out to the garage, I open it, I find his Bible with the card in it. It's a parish up in Massachusetts. I call up there and I'm like, hey, I'm looking for Father Dennis Rochford. We served together while I was in Iraq. He told me to keep in touch. I didn't. I did a really bad job of that. I'm wondering if there's a way that I can get a hold of him. And
Mm-hmm.
like the line is like silent, and I'm like, is anybody there? Hello? And they're like, oh, sir, we're really sorry to have to tell you this. He passed some time ago. And I was like, oh, really? How'd he pass? He had been a lifelong alcoholic and stuff
Mm-hmm.
too, on and off the wagon. So I was like, maybe
Mm-hmm.
his liver shut down or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. He got sick. And they said, it's best if we remember the departed as they were. And if you're Catholic, you know exactly what that means. That
Oh,
means suicide,
yeah.
because they think that's the unforgivable sin. It depends
Mhm.
on which side
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Catholicism. Some do, some don't.
Yeah.
And I was like, you need to tell me right now how he died, you know? And she was like, suicide. And so he jumped off a bridge. Um, and so like that was brutal
Mm-hmm.
for me, as I was just like, and I realized at that point I needed to talk about like what we
Mm-hmm.
endured,
Mm-hmm.
because like it ate him from the inside out, from like Vietnam to Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, the dude had been in forever.
Wow.
And I was like, dude, if this is eating a priest from like the inside out, then like what hope is there for me? And it was always there in the background. It was always kind
Yeah.
of like stirring underneath the surface. And so really that's what began my journey. But it was my editor too, who just encouraged me to take those next steps. And that's why ultimately I named my book Where Cowards Go to Die, because the synopsis is like I had to come to this realization that I could stay stuck where I was, never talk about what I've been through, let it eat me from the inside, never deal with the past, be an angry, parent or husband, or, he's just in this stage of struggle
Mm-hmm.
and, for forever. And I was like, that's a coward's way out. Like
Mm-hmm.
me knowing I should get better and I don't do anything about it. That's in its simplest form is cowardice.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized on the flip side that if I wanted to take courageous, proactive steps and get better, that the coward that lived in my heart would have to die. And so either
Wow.
way, like a coward was going to die. I
Mm-hmm.
would either die as a coward or I was going to kill that inner cowardice. And so that's,
Wow.
it kind of became the synopsis for the end of my book. It's like, I had to realize like I was operating in cowardice so many times in my life, whether that was not wanting to go to war initially, like what I talked about, or not wanting to get better,
Mm-hmm.
and I just realized like, as is true in most things in life, if you want to get busy getting better, then in some way, shape, or form, there's going to be a form of cowardice that dies, or you're going to die a coward. So, and that's really where I began to put in the work, because I realized I wasn't being brave and courageous. Everybody would look at me and be like, "Oh, look at all these awards. You're brave. You're a war hero, or whatever." And inside, I felt like a fraud. So,
Wow. Wow. This, I think this is such a, great example of how important it is to be, responsible with your role within society, regardless of, what you're involved with. But, that's, that's such a, profound way to just express it to the society. Um,
it's one I use now a lot. Like, I mean, you don't have to apply it to the military.
yeah,
I mean, if you're lonely, there's nothing brave about you staying lonely. Like, what
absolutely.
you're going to
Yeah.
have to do is you're going to have to get courageous and go to environments with people you don't know to make friends, and it may or may not work out, and there's risk involved.
Yeah.
But you're either going to die lonely and a coward, or you're going to have to kill that inner cowardice, develop those friendships. And that's what we're seeing a lot in society anymore, is like people are either buried in, an asynchronistic digital world
Hmm.
that where they're not experiencing that connection,
Yeah.
or they're going, "Oh, I have all these issues." And I go, "There's nothing brave about you staying stuck where you are, man. Like, what do you want to be brave, or do you want to die a coward? Like,
Yeah.
that's where you're at." So,
Wow.
and like the brave thing is to get better.
Yeah.
So to do the work.